The council chamber fell silent as Amara Voss stepped forward. Though only 15, her voice carried the gravity of an elder statesperson. Her piercing green eyes scanned the rows of alien delegates, each representing one of the Galactic Council's countless member species. She wore a modest diplomatic robe, but her confidence eclipsed even the most seasoned negotiators. "We are not here to divide," she began, her voice unwavering. "We are here to find unity in the chaos. To remind ourselves why this council exists at all." A murmur rippled through the chamber. Some alien diplomats looked intrigued, others scoffed openly. A hulking reptilian figure, Ambassador Ralzik, hissed, his jagged teeth bared. "Humans presume too much," he growled. "This child has no place here. Send for her mother." Amara held his gaze. "I speak with my mother's blessing, Ambassador. Humanity's commitment to peace is not bound by age or title. But it seems the Council's commitment to justice might be." The tension in the room thickened as delegates leaned in. Amara's words hung like a challenge. The argument at hand was about Vorliner, a barren, resource-rich moon orbiting a war-torn planet. Two species, the Zathari and the Krelix, claimed it as their own. Centuries of bloodshed had brought neither closer to victory, and the Council, weary of arbitration, sought to impose its will, seize the moon as a neutral asset under its control. Humanity, an advocate for sovereignty, opposed the motion. Amara continued, pacing deliberately. "The Zathari and Krelix have suffered enough. Taking Vorliner will not end the conflict, it will fuel more violence. Is this council not meant to safeguard peace, rather than provoke war?" Another delegate, a shimmering, gelatinous being from the Aquian Collective, sloshed forward. "Human naivety. The council must act decisively. Should we delay, billions will die. Billions are already dying." Amara shot back. "And the council does nothing until it benefits you. This isn't about saving lives. It's about control." Ralzik slammed his clawed fist onto the table. "Enough! This child—" "Ambassador," Amara interrupted, her voice steel. "If the council insists on dismissing me, at least have the courage to address the argument instead of my age." Laughter rippled through a few rows. Ralzik glowered but stayed silent. Amara turned back to the assembly. "Humanity offers an alternative. Let us mediate. A neutral force, not this council, not any one faction, can oversee peace talks. We stand ready to commit resources and personnel to ensure the safety of all parties." A pause. Delegates exchanged skeptical glances. For a moment, it seemed her words might sway them. Then, from the shadowed corner of the chamber, Councillor Nixel rose. A gaunt figure with translucent skin that glowed faintly blue, Nixel's voice was calm but icy. "Humans have forgotten their place." He stepped into the light, his pale features glinting with contempt. "Your species is young, reckless. You play at diplomacy, yet your history is steeped in violence. The galaxy has tolerated you because you've been quiet. Do not mistake that tolerance for trust." Amara's fist clenched, but she forced herself to breathe. "Councillor Nixel, if humanity's history disqualifies us from seeking peace, then half this chamber has no right to sit here." Gasps echoed. Nixel's lip curled. "Arrogant. Predictable. And irrelevant. The council will vote, and the matter will be settled." Amara opened her mouth to retort, but Nixel raised a thin hand. "Enough, girl. You have been heard." His words dripped with condescension. "Your species will be notified of the council's decision in due course." Guards stepped forward, signaling the session's adjournment. Amara stood frozen, frustration bubbling under her composure. She had argued brilliantly, but the council's minds had been made long before she spoke. Hours later, as the human delegation prepared to leave the council station, Amara lingered on the observation deck. Below her, the endless expanse of stars stretched into infinity, their cold beauty indifferent to the struggles of the living. A familiar voice broke her thoughts. "You were incredible, you know." She turned to see her mother, Dr. Elena Voss. The older woman's face, lined with the wisdom of years, was soft with pride. They didn't listen, Amara said bitterly. Elena rested a hand on her shoulder. You planted a seed. That's all we can do sometimes. Amara's jaw tightened. It's not enough. If they take Vorlaner, what happens next? They'll see us as weak, complicit. And we'll lose any chance to stop them in the future. Elena sighed. That's why we fight, Amara. Not because we always win, but because it's right. Before Amara could respond, a sharp alarm blared through the station. Both women tensed as a voice echoed over the intercom. Attention! Unauthorized vessel detected in proximity to the human delegation's transport. All personnel stand by. Elena's eyes widened. Amara! Before she could finish, an explosion rocked the station. The observation deck's glass cracked under the force, alarms screaming in every direction. Chaos erupted as guards and diplomats scrambled for safety. Elena pulled Amara close, shielding her from the shattering debris. But the blast force was too much. Amara was thrown across the deck, her head striking a railing. Elena screamed, rushing to her daughter's side, but Amara's eyes were already closed, her small frame limp. No! No, no, no! Elena's voice broke as she cradled her daughter. Around her, the station burned, but she didn't care. Amara was still, unnaturally so. Footsteps approached. Through her tears, Elena looked up to see a group of armored figures, Krellick's mercenaries, judging by their distinct carapace-like suits. One of them stepped forward, a cruel smirk visible through his cracked helmet. Apologies, Doctor. Wrong place, wrong time. He raised a weapon, aiming at her. Elena didn't flinch. Her grief had numbed her to fear. But before the mercenary could fire, station security arrived, weapons blazing. The mercenaries fled, their leader snarling a final insult. Tell your council humanity can't hide forever. Elena didn't watch them go. She couldn't. Her world had already ended. Amara's lifeless form was all she could see, her bright future extinguished. Later, in the sterile silence of the human embassy's infirmary, Elena sat alone beside her daughter's covered body. Her mind raced, her grief mingling with fury. Amara hadn't been collateral damage. This was deliberate. A message. The council had allowed it, or worse, orchestrated it. Elena's trembling hands clenched into fists. They thought humanity would bow, would retreat into silence. They were wrong. In the hours that followed, Elena didn't cry. She didn't sleep. She worked. Her fingers flew across ancient consoles, accessing files she'd sworn never to touch. Files her daughter's death demanded she open. By dawn, she stood in a hidden command room deep within the embassy, staring at a dormant console covered in dust. Her voice was steady, unyielding as she spoke the activation code aloud. Project Revenant. Authorization VAS Alpha 1. Initiate. Lights flickered, and a deep hum resonated through the room. Earth's ancient fleet, silent for centuries, stirred. Monitors lit up, displaying massive vessels buried beneath the planet's crust, their systems awakening. Elena stared at the screens, her grief transformed into determination. The galaxy had killed her daughter, but it would remember humanity's wrath. The chamber was dark except for the faint glow of monitors scattered around the room. Elena Voss stood at the center, her face illuminated by the ancient console in front of her. The hum of awakening systems echoed like a heartbeat, steady and relentless. A voice crackled through the room, mechanical and commanding. Project Revenant initiated. Authentication confirmed. Stand by for system diagnostics. Elena's breath hitched. The weight of what she had just done pressed down on her chest. For centuries, Earth had kept its fleet buried, the remnants of a violent era humanity had sworn to leave behind. But that era, she thought bitterly, had never truly ended. Amara's death was proof of that. Command access unlocked. Awaiting directive, the voice announced. She hesitated. The plan forming in her mind felt reckless, dangerous. Yet when she closed her eyes, all she could see was Amara's face, her bright, determined expression, her unwavering belief in justice. Elena clenched her fists. The Galactic Council wanted humanity to submit, to remain silent. They had underestimated what loss could awaken. "Begin reactivation sequence," she said, her voice steady. The monitors flared to life, displaying vast subterranean hangars filled with dormant ships. Sleek and angular, they shimmered faintly with the telltale glow of Kalyanite reactors, a technology long abandoned for its volatility. These ships were legends, spoken of in hushed tones by alien scholars who feared their destructive potential. And now, they would rise again. Reactivation sequence initiated. Estimated completion, 20 hours. Elena turned as the door behind her slid open. Commander Bryce Turan entered, his expression a mixture of disbelief and anger. Once a decorated military strategist, he had retired to a quiet life as an educator, teaching humanity's younger generations about the costs of war. Now, seeing the fleet reawakening, he looked like a man confronting a ghost from his past. "Elena," he began, his voice low. "Tell me this is some kind of sick joke." She met his gaze. "It's not." Bryce stepped closer, his tone sharp. "Do you have any idea what you're doing? Those ships were buried for a reason. The Council will see this as an act of war. They already declared war when they killed my daughter." She snapped. Her voice cracked, but she didn't falter. "They murdered a child, Bryce. Our child. And they expect us to sit back and accept it." Bryce froze. The mention of Amara hit him like a physical blow. He lowered his voice, his anger giving way to pain. "Do you think this is what she would have wanted? More violence? More death?" "She wanted justice," Elena replied. "She believed in this council, in its potential for peace. And they betrayed her. If we don't act, they'll keep betraying us, Bryce. How many more Amaras will there be before we say enough?" He sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. "So what's the plan? Wake up a fleet of warships and hope the galaxy bows down in fear?" "No," Elena said firmly. "We don't strike first. But we let them know we're not powerless. We remind them why humanity was feared. If they want war, they'll have to face the consequences." Bryce studied her for a moment, then glanced at the monitors. "You're activating the entire fleet?" "As much as we can. The reactors will take time to stabilize, but the Council doesn't know that. All they'll see is the power we've kept hidden." He shook his head, a bitter smile tugging at his lips. "You always were the stubborn one. And you always said I was right eventually." A faint laugh escaped him. "This time I hope you are." The next hours were a blur of activity. Word of the fleet's reactivation spread quickly, drawing a small but determined group of humans to Elena's side. Engineers, scientists, and former soldiers worked tirelessly to bring the ships online, their movements a symphony of precision and urgency. Despite the tension, there was an undercurrent of defiance, a shared understanding that they were standing up for something larger than themselves. As the fleet's systems came online, so did the transmissions. Alien news networks buzzed with reports of Earth's activity, their broadcasts a mixture of fear and speculation. The Galactic Council convened in emergency sessions, their deliberations shrouded in secrecy. But the messages they sent to Earth were anything but subtle. "This is madness," Bryce muttered as he read through the latest transmission. "They're demanding immediate deactivation and surrender." Elena scoffed. "Of course they are. They're scared. Scared enough to attack," he countered. "Their fleets are mobilizing. If they strike before we're ready—" "They won't," she said, cutting him off. "Not yet. They'll try to intimidate us first, to force us back into submission. But we don't back down." Before Bryce could argue, an alert blared through the room. One of the monitors displayed an incoming message from the Council. Elena motioned for silence as she accepted the transmission. The holographic figure of Counselor Nixel appeared, his translucent features twisted with disdain. "Dr. Voss," he began, his tone dripping with condescension. "Or should I address you as Commander now?" "Nixel," she replied coldly. "What do you want?" "To offer you a final chance to avoid annihilation," he said. "Deactivate your fleet. Surrender the Kalyanite reactors. and humanity will be spared. Elena's jaw tightened. Spared? Like my daughter was spared? Nixel's expression remained impassive. Her death was regrettable, but necessary. Humanity overstepped its bounds, and the galaxy cannot afford unchecked ambition. Unchecked ambition? Elena repeated, her voice rising. You murdered a child because she dared to believe in peace. And now you dare to lecture us about ambition? Nixel's gaze hardened. You misunderstand, Doctor. This is not a negotiation. If you persist in this folly, Earth will be reduced to ash. Elena leaned forward, her voice steady and cold. Try it. And you'll learn why humanity survived when others didn't. Nixel's image flickered and vanished, the transmission cut. The room was silent for a moment before Bryce spoke. That could have gone better. They'll come, Elena said, her tone resolute. And when they do, we'll be ready. As the final systems came online, the fleet's dormant engines roared to life. Monitors displayed the ships rising from their subterranean vaults, their sleek forms cutting through Earth's atmosphere like silent predators. The sight sent shivers through those watching, a mixture of awe and fear. Elena stood at the console, her hands gripping the edge as she watched the fleet assemble. In her mind, she could still hear Amara's voice, full of hope and determination. For her daughter, for humanity, and for the future they deserved, Elena would ensure the galaxy remembered one thing above all. Earth would not kneel. The room hummed with tension as Elena stood at the command center, staring at the array of holographic displays in front of her. Each showed a different angle of Earth's newly awakened fleet, shimmering with raw power as it hung in low orbit. Around her, the control room buzzed with activity, officers and engineers coordinating preparations for the inevitable confrontation. Bryce stood at her side, his expression unreadable. They're massing their forces, he said quietly, pointing to one of the displays. Multiple fleets converging on our position. They're not going to wait much longer. I know, Elena replied. Her voice was steady, but her hands gripped the edge of the console, her knuckles white. What's their estimated time of arrival? 18 hours, give or take, Bryce said. Enough time to position the fleet, but not enough to test the full capabilities of the Kalyanite reactors. We don't need perfection, Elena said. We just need to remind them what these ships can do. Bryce raised an eyebrow. That's a dangerous gamble. It's the only one we've got, she said. They think we're bluffing. We need to show them we're not. Before he could respond, a junior officer approached, his face pale. Ma'am, we've intercepted a transmission from the Council fleet. It's directed at you personally. Elena nodded. Patch it through. The holographic display shifted, revealing the sharp, angular face of Admiral Clythar, the leader of the Council's military forces. His silver eyes glinted with malice as he leaned forward, his mandibles clicking in what might have been amusement. Dr. Voss, Clythar began, his voice smooth and mocking. It seems humanity has finally decided to show its teeth. I must admit I'm impressed. I didn't think your species had the stomach for defiance. You killed a child, Elena said coldly. What did you expect? Gratitude? Clythar's mandibles clicked again. I expected you to understand your place. The Council maintains order. Amara was a regrettable casualty of that order. But this, he gestured vaguely, as if dismissing the fleet behind her. This is an overreaction. Order? Elena spat. You mean subjugation. Oppression. You hide behind diplomacy while you crush anyone who challenges your authority. Well, here's a lesson from humanity's history, Admiral. Oppressors always fall. Clythar chuckled, the sound grating and mechanical. Brave words. But history won't save you. Surrender now, deactivate your fleet, and the Council may show mercy. Resist, and Earth will be nothing but ash. Elena's gaze hardened. We don't need your mercy. Clythar's image flickered for a moment, his expression briefly shifting to one of genuine anger. Then he smiled, his teeth sharp and glinting. So be it. When our fleets arrive, your resistance will end in hours. And history will forget you. The transmission cut off, leaving the room in tense silence. Bryce broke it first. He's bluffing. Maybe, Elena said. But we can't count on that. How are the fleet's preparations? 70% operational, an officer reported. The Callionite reactors are stable, but we're still calibrating their full capabilities. Elena nodded. Focus on what we have. We need to position the fleet defensively, but we also need to send a message. Something that will make the Council think twice about pushing us further. Bryce frowned. What kind of message? She turned to him, her expression grim. The kind they'll never forget. Hours later, the fleet was in position. Earth's ships formed a defensive ring around the planet, their dark hulls bristling with weapons that hadn't seen action in centuries. On board the flagship, Elena stood on the command deck, her eyes fixed on the holographic display of the incoming Council fleets. They were massive, their combined forces dwarfing Earth's by sheer numbers alone. Status report, she said. Enemy fleets within firing range in 10 minutes, an officer replied. Our reactors are fully charged. Weapon systems are online, but targeting calibration is incomplete. Understood, Elena said. She turned to Bryce. What's the probability of success? He hesitated. Low. Even with the fleet's advanced technology, they outnumber us 5-1. And if the Callionite reactors destabilize mid-battle, we don't have a choice, she said firmly. This isn't just about Earth. If we back down now, the Council will tighten its grip on every species in the galaxy. We have to show them that there's a price for their tyranny. Bryce nodded, his jaw tight. Then let's make it a high one. As the enemy fleets drew closer, the tension on the command deck was palpable. Officers moved with precision, their voices steady as they relayed orders. Elena stood at the center, her presence a calm anchor in the storm. Admiral Clythar is hailing us again, an officer reported. Elena shook her head. Ignore him. He's stalling. The officer nodded, and the transmission was cut. Elena turned to the tactical display, her mind racing. The enemy fleets were now within range, their ships forming a massive, impenetrable wall. She knew they were testing her, waiting to see if humanity would fire first. Open a channel to the fleet, she said. The officer complied, and her voice echoed across every ship in the formation. This is Elena Voss. Many of you know why we're here. Some of you have lost loved ones to the Council's tyranny. Some of you have seen the costs of their so-called order. Today, we stand together, not just for Earth, but for every voice the Council has tried to silence. They think they can crush us. They think we'll kneel. Let's show them what it means to be human. A cheer erupted from the comms, the sound raw and defiant. Elena felt a surge of pride, but she quickly refocused. The battle was seconds away. Enemy fleets entering firing range. An officer called out. Elena's gaze sharpened. Target their lead formation. Fire at will. The flagship's weapons roared to life, beams of brilliant energy lancing across the void. The rest of the fleet followed suit, their coordinated assault cutting through the Council's front lines. Explosions rippled through the enemy formations as ships disintegrated under the onslaught. But the Council fleets responded quickly, their massive numbers overwhelming Earth's defenses. The flagship shuddered as enemy fire struck its shields, the impact sending a jolt through the command deck. Shields at 60%, an officer reported. We can't sustain this for long. Redirect power from secondary systems, Elena ordered. Focus fire on their command ships. We need to disrupt their chain of command. The battle raged on, the void filled with flashes of light and the debris of destroyed ships. Earth's fleet fought with a ferocity born of desperation, their advanced technology leveling the playing field. But the Council's numbers were relentless, and it was clear the tide could not hold forever. Elena gritted her teeth. Activate the Callionite reactors. Full power. Bryce's eyes widened. Elena, if we lose control. We won't, she said. Do it. The order was relayed, and the flagship's core began to glow with an otherworldly light. The energy it emitted rippled across the fleet, amplifying their weapons and shields to unprecedented levels. The tide of the battle shifted instantly, Earth's ships cutting through the enemy formations with devastating precision. Admiral Clythar's fleet faltered, their cohesion breaking under the assault. Elena seized the moment. Broadcast to the Council. Let them see what we're capable of. The holographic display lit up with the battle's broadcast, the destruction of the Council's ships visible to every corner of the galaxy. Elena's voice echoed over the transmission, calm and resolute. This is what happens when you push humanity too far. Leave now, or face annihilation. The Council fleets hesitated, their resolve shaken. One by one, they began to retreat, their ships vanishing into the void. The battle was over, but the message was clear: humanity would not kneel. The quiet that followed the retreat of the Council fleets was unnerving. On board the flagship, the command deck buzzed with muted relief, officers exchanging glances as if daring to believe they had survived. Elena Voss stood at the center of it all, her gaze locked on the holographic display that showed the Council's forces dwindling into the void. Bryce Tarrant approached her, his face a mask of exhaustion and guarded triumph. They're pulling back, he said. For now. For now, Elena echoed, her voice flat. She didn't turn to him, her hands still gripping the edge of the console. But they'll regroup. This wasn't a victory, Bryce. It was a warning. He nodded, understanding the weight of her words. And the message was sent. Loud and clear. Elena finally turned, her eyes shadowed but resolute. We need to make sure it's the last one. Before Bryce could respond, an officer approached, his expression a mixture of excitement and unease. Ma'am, we're receiving incoming transmissions from multiple alien factions. It looks like offers of alliance. Elena arched an eyebrow. Alliance? Or opportunism? A bit of both, the officer admitted. Some are smaller species seeking protection. Others are members of the Council looking to defect. They're calling the Council's leadership unstable after today's battle. Unstable, Elena repeated, a bitter smile tugging at her lips. They're not wrong. Bryce leaned in. This could be our chance to turn the tide permanently. If we gather enough support, we could force the Council to negotiate, she finished. On our terms. Exactly, Bryce said. But it's a risk. Some of these factions might be plants, sent to undermine us. Then we vet them carefully, Elena said. And we stay ready for betrayal. Prepare a response. We'll hear them out, but we won't trust blindly. As Bryce moved to relay her orders, another officer called out from the communication station. Ma'am, another transmission. High priority encrypted. From who? Elena asked. The officer hesitated. The Zathari High Marshal. That caught her attention. The Zathari were one of the Council's most powerful and loyal member species, their fleets a cornerstone of its military might. If the High Marshal was reaching out, it wasn't out of desperation, it was calculated. Patch it through, Elena said. The holographic display shifted to reveal High Marshal Clythar, his imposing, armored figure filling the screen. His scarred face and glowing red eyes gave him an aura of menace, but his voice was calm and measured. Dr. Voss, he began. Your fleet's display of strength was impressive. I doubt you hailed us just to pay compliments, Elena said coolly. No, Clythar admitted. I come with an offer. One that benefits both humanity and the Zathari. And what might that be? She asked, folding her arms. Clythar's expression remained unreadable. The Council is fractured. Today's events have sown doubt among its members. There is an opportunity here, one that could reshape the galaxy. You're proposing an alliance, Elena said, her tone skeptical. Not quite, Clythar said. I propose a partnership. The Zathari have long been the enforcers of the Council's will, but we are not blind to its flaws. The corruption, the arrogance, it has gone too far. We seek to restore balance, and we believe humanity has a role to play in that. Restore balance, Elena repeated. By what? Toppling the council and replacing it with another version of the same? Cryther's eyes narrowed. No. By dismantling the council's stranglehold on power and creating a coalition of equals. A galaxy where no single species dominates. Elena studied him, weighing his words. And what does the Zathari gain from this? Stability, Cryther said simply. War benefits no one. You've proven today that humanity is more than capable of defending itself. We would rather have you as allies than enemies. The room was silent as Elena considered his offer. Bryce stepped closer, speaking low enough for only her to hear. It's a gamble, Elena. If the Zathari betray us, they could cripple us, she finished. But if they're serious, this could be the leverage we need. She turned back to Cryther. We'll consider your offer. But understand this, humanity will not trade one master for another. If you're not willing to commit to true equality, this conversation is over. Cryther inclined his head. A fair demand. I will await your decision. The transmission ended, leaving the command deck in tense silence. Bryce exhaled slowly. Do you trust him? No, Elena said bluntly. But I believe him. The Zathari see the writing on the wall. They're hedging their bets. And if we make the wrong call? Bryce asked. Then we fight, Elena said. Just like we always do. Hours later, Elena stood alone in her quarters, staring out at the void. The adrenaline of the battle had worn off, leaving only the hollow ache of loss. She reached into her pocket, pulling out a small, worn pendant, Amara's. She held it tightly, the metal warm against her palm. I hope I'm doing the right thing, she murmured. I hope this is what you would have wanted. A soft chime interrupted her thoughts. Incoming message, the automated voice announced. Play it, she said. The holographic display lit up, showing a recorded message from Amara. Elena's breath caught as her daughter's face appeared, bright and full of life. Hi, Mom, Amara began, her voice filled with the same quiet determination that had defined her. If you're seeing this, it means I'm not here anymore. And that you're probably doing something really brave. Or really reckless. Or both. Elena smiled faintly, tears brimming in her eyes. I just want you to know, Amara continued, that whatever happens, I believe in you. I believe in humanity. And I believe that, no matter how dark things get, we'll find a way to make it better. That's what we do, right? We don't give up. The message ended, leaving Elena in silence. She closed her eyes, clutching the pendant tightly. We won't give up, she whispered. I promise. With renewed determination, she turned back to the console, ready to face whatever came next. Humanity's fight was far from over, but as long as she stood, they would not kneel.